Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Fair Housing Listening Session for Disabilities and Aging Population. We're going to have a presentation on the front end here that's going to last about 25 minutes or so. And then we're going to go ahead and open it up for people to provide their comments. It'll be mentioned a time or two today in the presentation, but today is not a Q&A. You'll use the Q&A to submit comments to us, but really this is an opportunity for us to hear from you. We do not have members of the panel who are here to provide any specific answers regarding programs or services. This is rather us asking the public their opinions and for their feedback on some items for this report update. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Douglas.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Fair Housing, Disabilities, and Aging Population Listening Session. My name is Douglas Chong. I am the Fair Housing Manager within the Housing Policy Development Division. I have been with HCD since 2018 in various positions. For those who may find it difficult to see me on your screen, I would like to describe myself. I have black hair, dark brown eyes. Today, my hair is slicked back. I'm wearing a button-up black dress shirt, and I have a black headset. We have a group of folks from HCD Fair Housing team with us today, but your presenter will be myself, Douglas, and my colleague, Suzanne. For today's listening session, we'd like to go over a few community standards to encourage an open and productive dialogue. If you wish to speak, please raise your Zoom hand by clicking the raise hand icon located at the bottom of your screen, and we will enable the ability to unmute your microphone so you can share your thoughts. Please use the Q&A located at the bottom of your screen to provide comments. Please note, if you wish to remain anonymous, please select that option when you're drafting your message. I would like to note that the name Q&A isn't really accurate for this session, as we are not taking questions today, but rather using this session to hear from you. We will be asking you some questions at the end of the presentation. Be mindful of different styles of communication and learning. Recognize that some of us are external processors who think out loud, while others are internal processors who need time to reflect before contributing. Be mindful of the space you occupy in conversations, allowing others to participate. Be curious. Embrace the opportunity to learn from one another. If someone shares something new or unfamiliar, stay curious. Take notes of their comments and revisit them later for further exploration. Use I statement. During today's training, when you share your thoughts or experiences, please use I statement. This approach fosters a non-defensive atmosphere and encourages constructive dialogue. For example, say, I don't understand, can you rephrase? Instead of saying, you don't make sense. Have us explore and develop the fair housing impediments. Your experience with disability or difficulties of aging, whether through first or secondhand knowledge, can help us shape our impediments and goals for the upcoming 5-year cycle. If you choose not to speak today, or if you think of something you'd like to share at a later point, you can always email us at aifairhousingreport@hcd.ca.gov. We will begin sharing the overview of the AI update timeline, as well as our public engagement plan. Then we'll talk briefly about fair housing. We will go over current trends and existing conditions in California regarding people with disability and aging population. Finally, we will provide you with some questions and open up for discussion. We will also launch the questions at polls so you can enter your type response that way if you choose. The AI team held a kickoff webinar on January 4th, and now we're in the listening session and webinar phase of the timeline. We will host 6 listening sessions, including this one, as well as 2 webinars between now and March 20th. They were all listed in the eBlast with registration links, but those eBlasts will be resent prior to the following listening session. So there will be reminders to register along the way if you have not yet done so. These registration links are also available on ACD website. Concurrently, we are seeking feedback through our community needs assessment survey until April 1st, and then we'll be working to finalize our report. We will open the public comment period and hold hearing from mid-July to mid-August, and we'll publish the final version at the end of August. I know this slide has a lot of information, but you do not need to memorize any of it. It's simply a snapshot of what we currently have scheduled. And we will advertise this event through eBlast, social media, and our website. The listening session we'll be conducting will cover any array of topics, including last week's homelessness session, today's disability and aging population discussion, persons who are immigrants, tribes and tribal residents, tenant protections, and finally, mobile home parks. You can register for any and all of these using the same eBlast you previously received, and we will sending out eBlasts along the way that will serve as reminder of the upcoming events. We will also host 2 webinars specific to urban housing and rural housing in March, as well as conducting a public hearing mid-July through mid-August. We do not yet know the dates or location of the public hearings. Once we have that ironed out, we will, of course, share the information with you. We do want to note that the state budget will have an impact on official travel. So if there's any change to the plan regarding the in-person hearings, we'll also make that announcement as soon as we know. We released the Community Needs Assessment Survey on January 30th in English, as well as Spanish, Chinese, Korean, Tagalog, and Vietnamese. It will be available until April 1st, 2024, and we really hope that you will all complete the survey as well as encourage others to do so. Visit ACD website, and on the main page, you'll find the survey. Once you select Begin Survey, you will see the language option available. We will continue mentioning it during any public meetings held through April 1st. And with that, I would turn it over to my colleague, Suzanne. Thank you.
All right, good morning, y'all. Just a technical note. Today we do have American Sign Language interpreters with us, Celio and Amy. If you'd like to see those folks, change your view in Zoom to turn on gallery view. You can select multiple thumbnail view to see our panelists, and if that's not working, please just enter it in the Q&A box, and we have a team of folks who will do their best to help you. All right, So I'm Suzanne Hempel, a data research specialist too within the Fair Housing Unit. I've worked in housing all of my career, and I'm going to play a quick video about my why. Why do I work in housing? Why am I here today? Why do I care about outcomes for people with disabilities and seniors? And I hope you all take a moment as we're watching this short video to drop your why into the Q&A box. Why are you here today? Why is housing important to you, your family, and your community? For anyone who would like to raise their Zoom hands and verbally share their why at the end of the video, we'll take just a couple minutes and call on some folks and hear the reason this subject resonates with you. If we're not able to get to each person, you're still welcome to share your thoughts at the end when we open it up for comments. So that's my daughter dancing with her dad, someone who lives with significant disabilities. Disability is a part of my family and our story. My kiddo knows a few things for sure. She loves her dad and she wants him to be able to go anywhere and everywhere she goes. Of course, she knows he's in a power wheelchair and needs ramps to get into buildings with stairs. She thinks the whole world should be accessible for her dad and everyone else. She expects him to be able to go to playgrounds, schools, restaurants, hotels, and pools. And that's what the law is in this country. But sometimes it doesn't work out that way. That's why we do this work. And if housing hasn't worked out for you, or systems failed, or things went wrong, I hope you'll share that today. So right now, if there are a couple folks that want to share their whys, we'll call on you.
Okay, so right now I have a single hand raised, but also we're seeing some comments. The people are providing their why within the Q&A as well. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and call on Louise Thompson. And can you share with us your why, if you could unmute?
Okay, I don't do this very often. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, I just recently got in touch with Disability Rights California and talked with them for a long time a couple of days ago, and they just told me about this series, and I thought I'd like to.
Are you there, Louise?
Okay, did I break it?
Oh, no, you're back. I'm so sorry. We're unable to hear you.
Okay, then please skip me.
Okay, go ahead and raise your hand again if you want to try to share momentarily, but we'll move on right now to Makai Freeman. You want to go ahead and unmute?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
My why is that for too long and for too many people, housing is such an untenable proposition. And those with very low, extremely low incomes have for some reason not had housing that we can choose and move into. And it's very important that our voices are heard now. We have so many people living on the street and so many fair housing laws down, not enforced. That is just unconscionable for a so-called affluent country like ours not to have systemic and replicable housing solutions for those very much in need. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We really appreciate hearing from you. Thank you. How about John Kindred? Do you want to go ahead and unmute?
Sure, thank you. The why for me is the fact that we have a housing shortage, especially for people who are elderly and disabled. And many of our housing is getting worse due to climate change. And many of our organizations and our leaders who are addressing the housing problem do not take take in the fact that climate change and the effects it has on natural disasters is making housing shortage even bigger, which in turn makes housing for people who are disabled and who are seniors or both even worse, because a lot of areas we can no longer move to and build homes or apartments. And I want to see in the talks that when they're addressing about putting in more housing for the elderly and the disabled, that they're putting it in safe areas, that we don't be put in fires prone areas or flood plain areas. As we've been seeing in the news all across the country, it's happening more and more. And a lot of these homes that they're building in apartments, they're in areas that's prone to natural disasters. And many of us use public transportation. And if something happens, we're stuck because no city has anything in place that I've ever heard or seen to get us out of anywhere doing evacuation. And we're pretty much left on our own. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, John. We appreciate hearing it back from you. I'm going to pause here. Anyone with your hands up, you're welcome to keep the hands up because we just have a little bit of the presentation left, and then we're going to continue for the rest of this time. We'll continue hearing from everybody. And I'll read a couple of the comments that we have in here. Somebody's why is the fastest growing cohort of homeless is older Californians. And as an older Californian themselves, they're concerned about the high cost of housing and its impact on their family, including their ASD son, who hopes to live on his own one day if he can afford it. That's a very important why. Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and move this, pass this back to Suzanne, and we'll continue. And anybody who has comments they want to share, we'll go ahead and open it up again at the end.
Thanks y'all so much for sharing your whys. It's really important. We're going to watch a brief video, just about 4 minutes long, about how people in disabilities are viewed and treated in this country.
Since childhood, Judy Heumann has faced ableism, institutionally, socially, and personally. New York's public school system prevented her from enrolling, and she was often bullied or excluded by her own peers. After a lifetime of activism, she is finally seeing a shift in how people with disabilities are viewed and treated. Her book is called Being Human, an unrepentant memoir of a disability rights activist. And she's the star of tonight's Brief but Spectacular.
When I was 5 years old in Brooklyn, New York, on East 38th Street, my mother did what every other parent did when their kid was 5. She took me to school to register me. And this was in the early 1950s. There were no motorized wheelchairs, so she pushed me to school, and it wasn't accessible. She pulled me up the steps, and the principal said I couldn't go to school because I was a fire hazard. I don't really know that there was an explanation. It just was. I think the average person, they see disability as a threat to not being able to do things as people have typically done them. And I think there's truth in that. But the question is it because one has a disability or because society itself has constructed itself in such a way because they haven't seen us? Discrimination against disabled people has existed from the beginning of time. And we're in a place right now where because of other movements, civil rights movement, the women's movement, Black Lives Matter movement, etc., people are speaking up and out. One of the first pieces of legislation that the disability community really engaged in was getting regulations developed for a provision of law called Section 504. Section 504 says you can't discriminate against someone who has a disability if the entity is receiving money from the federal government. It was the first time that many of these young disabled people felt a part of something and really felt that they were making a difference, not only for their lives, but for the lives of many others. There is a shift, I believe, going on in our society where we're looking at race and gender equality and disability as issues that we need to address, that diversity is something that makes our companies stronger, that diverse businesses provide better services for customers. I also am a very big believer that the disability rights community cannot stand on its own. We need to be working with all other movements, and we want all other movements to be inclusive of disabled people. If we are actively learning and working together, we can do things like make sure when housing is being built in our communities that it's accessible, not just for people who have physical disabilities today, but if you're going to have a physical disability tomorrow. I think having a disability really has allowed me to do and get in touch with so many things and opportunities that otherwise would not have happened. People look at us as the label of our disability. And it is a part of who we are, but it is not who we are. My name is Judy Heumann, and this is my brief but spectacular take on the disability rights movement.
Judy Heumann, so inspiring to every one of us. Thank you. And you can watch all of our brief but spectacular episodes at pbs.org/newshour/brief.
All right, y'all. And with that, we're going to take a look at some current data trends and existing conditions. California's housing crisis is a half century in the making. Decades of underproduction, underscored by exclusionary policies, have left housing supply far behind need and the cost soaring. As a result, millions of Californians who are disproportionately lower income and people of color must make hard decisions about paying for housing at the expense of food, healthcare, childcare, and transportation. 1 in 3 households in the state doesn't earn enough money to meet their basic needs. Housing is considered affordable when a household pays less than 30% of their income on all housing costs. California's inadequate and vulnerable supply of affordable homes disproportionately impacts our most vulnerable communities. Disability status and housing challenges. 4,275,000 Californians live with a disability, the largest population of any state. We're also a very large state. Health and safety are directly linked to housing, and yet many people with disabilities face enormous barriers to finding suitable housing to accommodate their needs. People with disabilities are the most likely population to experience homelessness, be unable to afford housing, and they face the highest rates of housing discrimination. So when we talk about finding housing solutions for people with disabilities, we're working on a really important piece of California's housing crisis. I wanted to take a moment to echo the words of Allie Cannington. She's the Senior Manager of Advocacy and Organizing for the Kelsey Organization, a disability-forward nonprofit based in the Bay Area. Allie says, "We recognize disability as a part of the human experience to be welcomed and celebrated. We design supports, services, and spaces with the recognition that designing for disability means better homes for everyone. We center on those who have been most marginalized, knowing there is no better future if it's not better for all." The majority of California's housing stock was built prior to 1980 and is 40 years old or older. Housing built prior to 1990 generally lacks accessible features required under the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Fair Housing Act. A study out of Harvard found that 1%, just 1% of all rental housing in the US includes all 5 basic most needed accessibility features. Those features are step-free entryways, single floor layouts, levered doors, accessible electrical controls, and lastly, wide doors and hallways. As I mentioned, compared to the rest of the country, California has an older housing stock. The graph on the left side compares housing built before 1990 and then after 1990. Housing built before 1990 generally lacks required accessibility features. The Fair Housing Act design and construction requirements provide modest accessibility standards, and they apply to covered multifamily dwellings built for first occupancy after March 13th, 1991. Dwelling units designed according to the Fair Housing Act provide accessible building entrances, accessible and usable common areas, usable doors, accessible routes into and through covered dwelling units, accessible environmental controls, reinforced bathroom walls for grab bars, and usable kitchens and bathrooms. These Fair Housing Act compliant dwellings are also considered to be adaptable because they have design elements that can be adjusted to accommodate different people. Under today's building standards, most multifamily new construction developments include adaptable dwelling units with certain accessibility features. However, some of the most critical pieces of accessibility, such as a zero-step shower and sufficient turning radiuses in kitchens and bathrooms, those are the most difficult and costly to modify after construction. And the largest source of affordable housing in California is privately owned and operated housing, known as naturally occurring affordable housing. These units are primarily affordable because of the age of the unit. Most were built 40 to 50 years ago. However, they lack accessibility features required by modern building codes. Under California law, a disability is a mental or physical impairment, disorder, or condition that limits a major life activity. The chart depicts disability type and occurrence. Independent living and ambulatory difficulties are the most common in California. Disabilities can make it difficult for a person to perform activities such as walking, climbing stairs, dressing, bathing, learning, or remembering. A condition can also impede a person from being able to go outside the home alone or to work. Many individuals with ambulatory self-care or independent living difficulties are able to live independently with appropriate supports in place. These supports include caregivers or a program that's called In-Home Supportive Services, also known as IHSS. Many seniors, for example, are able to continue living independently as they age and avoid entering into assisted living facilities by making physical modifications to their homes or obtaining supportive services. California needs more services and housing options to accommodate our aging population. And just lastly, state and federal laws prohibit discrimination on the basis of disability and all types of housing transactions. As the chart indicates, disability increases with age. The blue bars represent California's population under the age of 65, and the orange bars represent Californians 65 and older. Seniors or people over the age of 65 are more likely to have a disability compared to other groups. For non-seniors, self-care and cognitive disabilities are the most common form of disability. This chart depicts disability by race for California. Note, there are higher rates of disability in California among Black or African American folks. The disability rate for the total non-institutionalized population is 11.2%. It's 15.8% for Black or African American folks. People with disabilities, and particularly people of color, continue to be disproportionately impacted by our state's housing crisis and do not have access to the housing they need. As we talk about disability and race, we'd like to highlight images from the Disabled in Here project. There are 2 images on the screen. Let me describe the image on the left. 6 disabled people of color smile and pose in front of a concrete wall. 5 people stand in the back with the Black woman in the center holding up a chalkboard sign reading, "Disabled in Here." A South Asian person is in a wheelchair sitting in the front. Next, I'll describe the image on the right-hand side of the page. 3 Black and disabled folks raise fists in front of a white wall. Not all people with disabilities live in community-based settings. California has 863,000 people that live in group quarters. Group quarters can be institutional or non-institutional. Institutional group quarters include things like correctional facilities, nursing homes, or mental hospitals. Over 39% of Californians living in group quarters have a disability. Nearly a quarter of folks in adult correctional facilities have a disability, and the vast majority of folks living in nursing facilities or skilled nursing facilities have a disability. And just to note, non-institutional group quarters, that would include things like college or university housing, military quarters, or other non-institutional facilities. People with disabilities, unfortunately, experience disproportionate rates of poverty. Lower income households are more likely to include members with disabilities than higher income households. So this chart, the orange boxes, those are households under HUD's area median family income, 80% and below, and the blue boxes are all income levels. Extremely low income households are more than twice as likely to include an individual with a disability than households earning above moderate income. This is due in part to the challenges individuals with disabilities have faced historically and currently face in accessing equal educational and employment opportunities as non-disabled folks. Now we're going to transition and discuss issues affecting the aging population. California's households are changing and aging. 1.8 million California households 60 and over live alone. By 2030, adults 60 and over will make up 30% of California's population. 746,000 California households consist of 3 or more generations. Our state has more multi-generational households than any other state. Reasons why include housing costs and other financial constraints, care needs, and cultural preferences. 95,000 Californians live in nursing homes. Nursing homes offer a sometimes necessary option for individuals needing long-term supportive services. Older Californians, as was mentioned earlier today, are the fastest growing age group experiencing homelessness. The diversity of the 60+ age population is increasing. In 2020, at that top box on your screen, a little over half the subject population was white, and that percentage is expected to drop by about 10% by 2040 and fall even further in 2060. The Hispanic population is expected to grow significantly and will be the population that overtakes the majority by 2060. Minimal changes are expected in the Asian, Black, American Indian, Alaskan Native, and multiracial populations. California's aid to low-income seniors and people with disabilities cannot compete with a high cost of housing. This data comes to us from our partners at Justice and Aging. Thanks for sharing that. The Supplemental Security Income and state supplementary payment grants help over 1 million low-income adults and people with disabilities pay for housing and other necessities. This slide depicts multiple counties, the grant amount, fair market rent, that estimates the dollar amount below which 40% of standard quality rental housing units are rented. The current individual grant of $1,183 is less than the fair market rent for studio apartments in 25 counties in California. For example, Alameda County at the top of the chart. So the max grant amount is $1,183. The fair market rent is $1,825. It exceeds the max grant, and no county in California is it affordable for someone who just received supplemental security income and the state supplementary payment to pay fair market rent. And just as a reminder, housing is considered affordable if someone pays 30% or less of their income towards rent. This is a structural problem. There's a reason people are not able to afford rents and end up unhoused. Over 2 million Californians aged 60 and over are economically insecure, struggling to afford the rising cost of housing, health, and care. Almost 30% of Californians are considered poor or near poor, but dramatic economic disparities exist. This chart shows the percent of poor and near poor Californians aged 60 and over. Notice the higher percentage of Black women over 60 that are near poor and poor compared to all folks over 60 and white men over 60. Next, I'm going to touch on California's master plan for aging. There are bold goals for 2050. Goal number 1, housing for all ages and stages. We live where we choose as we age in communities that are age, disability, and dementia friendly, and climate and disaster ready, as was mentioned earlier today. The target is to have millions of new housing options to age well. Goal 2, health reimagined, that we will have access to the services we need to live at home and our communities and to optimize our health and quality of life. Target, close the equity gap and increase life expectancy. Goal 3, inclusion and equity, not isolation. We will have lifelong opportunities for work, volunteering, engagement, and leadership, and we will be protected from isolation, discrimination, abuse, neglect, and exploitation. The target, keep increasing life satisfaction as we age. Goal 4, caregiving that works. We will be prepared for and supported through the rewards and challenges of caring for aging loved ones. Target, 1 million high-quality caregiving jobs. Goal 5, affording aging. We will have economic security for as long as we live. Target, close the equity gap and increase elder economic sufficiency. All right, y'all, we are nearing the end. So what does HCD's Fair Housing Plan do? Well, here's an example from our 2020 plan. In 2020, we identified an impediment, it's number 10, that there's insufficient accessible housing stock. This means that there's a lack of adequate accessible housing options compared to the need, and that limits housing choice for people with disabilities. What did we do? We had a goal to evaluate and develop a plan to increase the percentage of accessible units across state housing programs. What was the result? HCD significantly increased the percentage of sensory and physically accessible units required within a couple of our programs, Supernova and the National Housing Trust Fund. Sensory accessible units were increased from 2% to 10%. Mobility accessible units were increased from 5% to 15% in new construction developments. This increase is meant to reflect the need within the income eligible population and the general lack of units with accessibility features available within California's older housing stock. We hope that the feedback we receive in this listening session and through additional outreach efforts, through that we'll be able to create goals for this next report cycle that address the current issues. Now we're going to move into our feedback and listening session. On the next slide, we'll share our discussion questions, and we're asking that you provide us with your feedback in response to these questions. I want to reiterate, this is not a question and answer session where we're in a position to provide you with answers about programs or services, but rather we're asking for your input to help shape the report and help us set up some department fair housing goals for the coming years. So these are the questions we'll be discussing today. I'm just going to read the first one out loud. Have you ever wanted to live somewhere but couldn't? What prevented you from living there? Was it related to a disability?
Okay. So we will go ahead and move into these questions like Suzanne was saying. We'll leave these on the screen for right now. I'm also going to launch each question as a poll. So we will be taking comments verbally in order and as many as we're able to. We are, of course, still monitoring the Q&A that's coming in. And then in the poll, I'll give everybody maybe a couple of minutes per question to type their responses if you do not want to be sharing verbally today or into the Q&A. So starting with this first question, I'll go ahead and launch the poll first. So as Suzanne had read, have you ever wanted to live somewhere but couldn't? What prevented you from living there? And was it related to a disability? So that should already appear on your screens. We'll go ahead and give it a minute or two for folks to type some stuff in. As you're typing, I will go ahead and let you know we were experiencing some technical difficulty in the beginning part of this presentation. People were unable to view our ASL interpreters. It looks like that has been corrected. I hope that you are all now able to see our interpreters who are here doing a wonderful job helping us out today. I'm going to give it about 30 more seconds on the poll, and then I'll go ahead and close it, okay? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll right now. Then we'll move over to taking some of the hands up that we have. We'll go ahead and take some comments back from people. If you wanted to share something in the poll and you weren't able to before it closed, you are always welcome to email us at aifairhousingreport@hcd.ca.gov if you want to respond to any of these and weren't able to within the time frame. You can definitely send them there and our team will see them. Okay, so I see Richard Scaff. So you can go ahead and unmute and share your comment if you would like.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Sorry, I'm on two phone calls at the same time, so bear with me.
Okay.
I first want to say thank you to H&CD. As in my memory, and I'm almost 80, so please don't hold me to my memory. I don't remember a state agency, including H&CD, that's ever done what you're doing today. And I just want to say thank you for this. It certainly won't allow everybody to talk about all of their issues. And it may only allow a few people to talk about their experiences in housing and living in their community. But I applaud you for giving whoever's able to the opportunity to do that. We have not had that opportunity. I've just been informed today that we are going to be we're going to have an ABAG MTC sponsored event in the 9 Bay Area County that I hope H&CD will participate in. The listening event will be very similar to this, except much larger. We're going to have, I hope, policymakers, boards of supervisors, city council members, maybe some state legislators and some state agencies like H&CD and DSA and some others. They're not to speak, but to listen to people from the 9 Bay Area counties that live their lives every day with a disability, whatever type of disability they may have. And I would like to show at least portions of this video to those people, because you are allowing for issues to be discussed. I just saw about, for example, single-family home visitability, housing, single-family home housing that has never been accessible to people with mobility disabilities or people who live in those single-family homes who become a person with a disability, with a mobility disability. We need to change history. in California. We need to show that our leadership by having regulations created that require all new single-family homes to have no step entrance, a fully accessible bathroom on the main floor, a fully accessible bedroom on the main floor, and fully accessible kitchen and living area on the main floor. So that not only can people with disabilities visit people in single-family homes, which now many of us are not able to, but also allow people to live their lives, if they so desire, from birth to death, without having to be forced into a convalescent facility in their aging, during their aging years. So I applaud you for this very important event today. And I hope H&CD will do more of these. The other issue that I hope H&CD will consider that we've been very frustrated with for a number of years is a redesigned advisory committee represented with representation from people with disabilities from across the state that actually get to bring to that committee's meetings issues about housing and community needs that those representatives bring to those meetings of an advisory committee. We've had a much more restricted process most recently in the last couple of years, and that's been very disappointing. So I hope this event today proves that H&CD is on a new, is going in a new direction and allowing, as one part of their responsibility, the disability community statewide to talk about their needs as it relates to what H&CD has authority to affect. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your feedback, Richard. We really appreciate it, and we're really glad that you joined us today. I'm going to move on to John. Do you want to share anything, John? You can unmute. John Kindred?
Yes.
Hi.
I think another big problem too is when the disabled community come to meetings and express a lot of things, they listen to us, but then it stops there. You know, they don't never really take the things and actually act on them, you know? So it's kind of like a lot of times we feel like they really don't care. That needs to change. And anytime anything is put in place, the people who is affected the most should be part of the talks from the start to the end. And that's something that has not been done, you know? So everybody needs to be there. But also too, I feel that the disabled community itself has not stepped up. A lot of times we forget we have one of the few clubs, our numbers only grow. It never decrease. And we have power. And it doesn't take money, because when it comes to voting on something, it's about who votes and who don't. It's not about who spends the money. And we need to start to realize we're all in the same boat, and we need to start working together and use our political power and everything we have to fight for our rights, our children's rights, and their children's rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Okay, let me see. I'm going to move over to Harrison, if you want to unmute.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great, thanks. Hi, I'm Harrison. I'm calling from Leading Age California. We represent around 400 nonprofit providers of affordable senior housing. And a problem that related to question number one that we often see is that, affordable housing across the country and in California, an older adult or a person with a disability, they're eligible to live in basically all of it, but not all of that housing is able to meet the needs of aging people and people with disabilities. So what often happens is that an older adult might move into an affordable housing community that doesn't have any sort of on-site services that affordable senior housing communities have. Affordable senior housing communities, they have service coordinators and other things like that that help people who are aging and those with disabilities stay stably housed. So people who move into buildings that don't have that, they end up getting prematurely institutionalized. They go to nursing homes, even though they don't need it. And as many people on the call probably know, there's not many options for assisted living for low-income people in California. So I view that as sort of a fair housing issue, that, even though people can move into a lot of affordable housing buildings, they're not necessarily set up in a way to help them stay stably housed. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Harrison. I'm going to pause here briefly so that I can launch the second poll. In the second poll, we'll do the same thing where we'll give it a minute and a half or 2 minutes for people to type in their responses. And the question is, what does your ideal community look like? Does it exist? What would need to happen for that to become a reality? So I'll go ahead and launch that now. Okay, so that should be on your screen right now. While everybody is typing, while the poll questions will be going out in the order that you see them on the screen, if you raise your hand to make a comment, you can comment about anything, any of these questions. It doesn't have to be in order, or any other thought that you choose to share with us. Okay, it's been about a minute. I'll give it another maybe 45 seconds. Okay, I'm going to close it in about 10 seconds. And again, if you're unable to return an answer to the poll in time, you can always send any of your comments to AI Fair Housing Report at hcd.ca.gov. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end it. Thank you all for your responses. I'm going to move back over to the folks who have their hands up. And right now I see Carrie. And Carrie, you can go ahead and unmute.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Carrie Madden, and I'm with Cal Life Independent Living Center in downtown Los Angeles. I once lived in a community nonprofit housing facility, In that facility, there were 16 units. Only 4 were wheelchair specific. So there was accessible restrooms where I could roll my wheelchair in and roll in and take a shower. But clearly there was a greater need than in that community than having only 4 units that were accessible. There were other wheelchair users that got into units that didn't have the extra room in the restrooms, where people would roll their wheelchairs and smash into the toilet or actually through their walls. They also had people who were being lifted into bathtubs and were being dropped. And one individual had a skull fracture because of this. Another person's kitchen, he couldn't use any of the cabinets above, and the storage underneath the sink was too small. So when they did fire inspections, he would always get cited and told that he has to remedy putting the food on the floor. He has to stop it, but there was no way for him to use the cabinets properly. We need universal design, and especially you would think that the units for a brand new facility that was built like 25 years ago would all have the units accessible, but they didn't. So my main point is universal design. We really need it so that people with all sorts of disabilities have a place to live. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Carrie. Okay, I'm going to move over to Kaylee. Do you want to go ahead and unmute Kaylee?
Yep. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Hi, I'm Kaylee. I actually work for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Unit within HCD. And I think this is a good conversation. And I think the biggest thing that sort of needs to happen in order for any of what we talk about to be realized today is, especially within, and I apologize, this is kind of jumping ahead to question number 3.
Okay.
But the big shift that needs to happen, especially within government, is for disability not to be considered an afterthought. It really needs to be part of the process and not something that afterwards people go, oh, and we should make this accessible. It should automatically be part of the processes. And this is, that's why involving people from the disabled and aging community is so important, because, if you don't have that lived experience, it's not probably going to be on the forefront of your mind, because you don't have to worry about that. But the other thing that is really important to consider, especially when we design housing and really any structure, is that accessibility is so important, because somebody had said it earlier, the disability community is not one that loses numbers, because everybody at some point in their life is most likely going to be disabled just due to aging. Those two things are interconnected. That's just how human bodies, work. And so that's something to take into consideration, and something that I always point out when I do talk about accessibility, is that a lot of those features, because when we talk about universal design, sometimes people will kick up a fuss for usually like visual, like aesthetic purposes, but I always like to point out pavement cuts, I think, is probably the best example of universal design, where those didn't used to be a thing. They were designed specifically to originally those little flat parts of the pavement that let you get up onto the curb. And those were originally designed for wheelchair users. However, it made things easier for people who use canes, people who are pushing strollers or shopping carts. That universal design benefited everybody. So designing our housing like that is the next logical step. in doing that, because it does benefit everybody. And then that becomes the norm. It becomes expected, and that accessibility becomes ingrained in the way that we develop our housing policies and are actually, you know, in the way that we build those housing units. I mean, and there's definitely something to say for income accessibility, because that is another issue. But I think sort of in order for us to even get to that point, the shift that has to happen within government is that this isn't an afterthought. It's not something that you do after the fact. It has to be from the jump. You are planning to make your processes and programs with accessibility in mind.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing that, Kaylee. Okay, I am going to move over to, I think it's probably pronounced Cindy, but please correct me if I am wrong. You can go ahead and unmute.
You pronounced it correctly. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
My name is Cindy Soto. I'm with Cal Life Independent Living Center in downtown LA. I would like to talk to you about the accessibility of sober living homes. A vast majority of sober living homes receive government funding in order to provide the services and the housing that people need. Many of these people have physical disabilities as well as are duly diagnosed. So more often than not, these homes are not designed for people with mobility issues, because they're situated in very old buildings, because that's where they can afford the lease and the rent, that sort of thing, and they're just not built for under accessibility codes. So not only are the buildings inaccessible, but all the programs are also discriminating against us, because they don't want service dogs. They will not let our caregivers come and help us. And just like some other people mentioned, you know, the doorways and the bathrooms are not accessible. So what I think would be great to have is for how the government entities fund some practical the accessibility of the buildings. And let's see, so if they upgrade the facilities, then everyone would be able to could remain healthy and safe. And one last thing is, if the cities and jurisdictions of this state would follow their housing element, and we would not be in the mess that we are in today. So come on, mayors, board of supervisors, do what the right thing and help us to get housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cindy. We appreciate you sharing your thoughts. I'm going to go ahead and launch into question number 3 in the poll, which is, what do you want the government to do to make your community better? And I received a little bit of feedback through the Q&A that a little bit extra time is needed. So I'm going to go ahead and give a few minutes for this one, okay? So I'll go ahead and launch question number 3 right now for typed feedback. I'll go ahead and mute myself, and I'll give it a couple minutes before I come back. Just a little bit of a time check here. It's been just about 2 minutes, so I'll give it a little bit longer, okay? Okay, it's been about 3 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. I see just another couple of answers coming in here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end it right now. Thank you all for your responses to that question. And why don't we go ahead and move back over. Let's see here. I see Cindy's hand up and I can't tell, is that still raised from earlier? Cindy, is your hand still raised from earlier?
No, sorry, I didn't see it to lower. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to move over to Lisa. Lisa Cooley, you want to go ahead and unmute?
Yes, I'm going to say that aging in place needs to be redefined in California. And what I mean is that if you're over either 62 or 65, we need more housing options for seniors, and especially seniors who have disabilities, because every senior with or without a disability cannot afford either typical assisted living communities that we've all heard of in the state, or can also not afford private pay home care for attendant care that we have all heard about without naming names. And we need something for seniors who are in the middle of the income spectrum. And by that, I mean seniors who make too much money for private home health care and different types of private in-home health care, but who also cannot afford traditional senior living communities that we might be aware of. HCD needs to create aging in place solutions that benefit seniors now and future seniors with and without disabilities.
Okay, thank you very much for your feedback, Lisa. I really appreciate that. It looks like the next person with their hand up is Shella. You want to go ahead and unmute?
Hello, my name is Shella Dumong, and I am participating in this listening session and hope that I can bring to HCD some solutions that I find to be really needed in the community. I am the mom of Simone, who has Down syndrome. I am on the Developmental Services Task Force, as well as on the Housing Subcommittee of DACLA, which is formerly Olmsted. But I'm speaking my suggestions at this point in time as the Executive Director of Chance Housing in Santa Barbara, which is the Coalition for Housing Accessibility, Needs, Choices, and Equality. And my first comment is about something that you spoke about a little bit earlier, which is when HCD and, sort of upped the accessibility percentage from 5% to 15% for tax credit properties, for sure. But the thing that's missing that needs to be solved by HCD is that you can build the units accessible, but the developers don't have a means of ensuring that they maintain a list that has people who need the accessibility features and have a Section 8 voucher or some rental subsidy at the same time. So in the project review, in the scoring, you need to add a couple of additional metrics. Number one is that the housers explain to you a way that they're going to be doing outreach on those units to communities of people that need the accessibility features. And then if the people on that list don't have a Section 8 voucher, then that local housing authority, that there's some kind of connection or promise or arrangement there, because you're talking about in the wild, finding people on a housing list that have two unicorns. Number one, that an accessible housing unit has become available in an affordable development. And number two is that they earn enough money to pay the rent is. They're going to need a subsidy. So you need to close that gap in order to really have the greatest effect. And that is one of my suggestions. The other suggestion goes back years to when myself and Marty Emoto and some other housing advocates went to a meeting at HCD to talk about what was going to be happening with the new coordinated entry sort of requirements that were coming down from the feds, right, from HUD. And the state was going to be implementing that. And HCD was, kind of taking suggestions on how that was going to go. What happened is this: the scoring tool that judges people's vulnerability and then which translates into their access to housing resources, right? The more vulnerable you are, the higher your score, the quicker you get the housing subsidy or the housing unit, right? That document, that scoring tool does not necessarily include a separate scorable category for persons with developmental disabilities. So in other words, you may have a question under, mental health, but really developmental disabilities, cognitive, intellectual needs to be a separate scorable category. And I can see that HCD could mandate that the jurisdictions within California add that. And my third comment is an emerging issue. And that has to do with HCD's role in addressing the algorithms of exclusion, which are occurring in the community right now around things like having to apply online for, housing units, or, go online to apply for Section 8 vouchers, or tenant screening services, how they're excluding our folks. And HCD needs to, at some point, sit down and recognize that with all of technical advances that are happening, that our folks need to be protected against the algorithms of exclusion. I have 3 examples that I'm dealing with right now, I could really use your help with. And I won't go into it since it's not really, it's a little too technical and niche for what this call is. And those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shella. We appreciate it. I'm going to move into the next question. I know we're sort of coming up on time, and I want to make sure we can get the written responses for some of these poll questions. So I see Frank and Serena right now with your hands up. I'm going to get to you after question number 4 that I'm going to launch right now. And that question is going to be, here, I'll launch it and then say it. What does accessible housing mean to you? What makes housing accessible or inaccessible? I'll go ahead and mute for a couple of minutes, and then I'll come back to remind you of a time check in about 2 minutes. Just want to provide a time check. It's been about 2 minutes, a little over 2 minutes. I'll probably give it another maybe 30 or 45 seconds, okay? Okay, we're coming up on the 3-minute mark. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and close it. Again, if you wanted to provide any written responses and you weren't able to do so here today, you are always welcome to email us at aifairhousingreport@hcd.ca.gov. And I will pop over to, I see, let's see, Frank. Frank, you want to go ahead and unmute?
Yes, thank you. My name's Frank Welty, and I am the chair of the Housing Committee of the California Council of the Blind. I want to thank everybody who's given such good input on the concerns of the various disability communities. I want to mention 2 concerns from the blind and visually impaired community before we end the call. The first one is that a big barrier to access for housing for people who are blind and visually impaired is access to housing portals, housing websites, accessible housing applications that can be filled out independently by people who are blind and visually impaired. A lot of work needs to be done in that area. The second area of concern is that increasingly appliances are being manufactured that don't have manual controls like buttons and knobs, so that it's difficult for blind people to use even basic appliances like ovens and stoves. And so there needs to be regulations that ensure that those appliances are either installed by default, or at least that they're available to be swapped in if needed for access for people who are blind and visually impaired, not just limited to that 5% or whatever of units that are defined as accessible to people with information disabilities. That leaves 95% that aren't. So we need to address that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank. I will move over. We've got a couple of minutes here left for comments. I'll move over to Serena. You want to go ahead and unmute, Serena?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Serena Cantway. I am a housing coordinator and a SOAR coordinator here in Nevada County with Freed Center for Independent Living. I am the HDAP coordinator, and I also work with SSI, SSDI, Outreach and Recovery. Big part of my job is housing. Big part of my job has been landlord liaison. I've become this central hub for people with disabilities due to lack of access. I know that it's been mentioned in this series here that the accessibility for the new construction that is happening, and how the percentages have went up. But in my rural area, a lot of it is old construction. There's not a whole lot of new construction happening. We have had access to grants such as the community block or the DOR, and we've even presented these to landlords, but they don't have a timeline in which they're required to respond to us. I have an example of a consumer who went into an apartment. They agreed that they were going to go ahead and help with a ramp because this person was in a chair. We had contractors come out. We had a community block grant. We had over $15,000 that we could do to build this new ramp. And they didn't have a timeline in which they needed to respond. And so this person inevitably, with our lack of IHSS providers and everything else, has been, using every resource possible to manage. They're not on the street anymore, but it's still not enough. The apartment complex even put in some accessible appliances, refrigerator, stove, and now is trying to charge that person for those appliances. So there's something else that we're fighting, that they feel that they can put this person on fixed income in debt and then inevitably jeopardize their housing if they don't pay this $4,000 bill. Not a choice of appliances that they would have ordered, the choice that the apartment manager made, and then sent a bill to them without any notice, no signed agreement that they would pay for it, nothing. So this is something else we're fighting. And then I have to agree with everybody else about the accessibility for applications. In our county in 2021, I think our regional housing is regional. It has 4 different counties. So we were only utilizing about 230 vouchers out of 1,880. We are now utilizing almost 700 of them due to the continuum of care and coordinated entry programs getting together and making sure that we built a team that hit out every landlord that we possibly could. But we still fight to this day our housing authority on accessibility. They don't give extra timelines for people with disabilities. They don't. They're still, they'll send out something in the mail and then the person has 2 days to get it in. And if they have accessibility or transportation issues, sometimes mental health issues that cause them to shut themselves in, they're not going to get that paperwork in time. And these people are losing vouchers because of this accessibility issue. And every time I address it, I'm told to go to the board. I shouldn't have to go to the board to make something accessible for people with disabilities, of any disability. So I have to agree with everybody else with the applications and processes. They need to be fair. There needs to be better accessibility to these things. I have served over 360 people in the last year with disabilities and application services. And it is so hard to try to keep up on all the paperwork and things that are due when they won't allow for more time with people with disabilities.
Okay. Thank you
There's
very
so
much.
much more. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I know, no, I completely understand. Just in the interest of time, we have to continue moving on. But if you have additional thoughts that you want to share on it, again, I do encourage that you go ahead and email us. We're going to be reading every one of them. Okay.
Okay, you got it.
Thank you so much for coming today. Okay, with the few minutes that we have left, I'd like to launch into poll question number 5. I'm going to launch it right now. The question is, have you ever lost your housing because of something related to your disability? What would have helped you keep your housing? I'm going to go ahead and mute myself for a couple of minutes while you type. Just a quick time check. We're a little over 2 minutes. I'm going to give it maybe 30 more seconds so we can make our final announcements. Okay, I'll go ahead and leave the poll up, but I did want to let everybody know how much we appreciate you coming today and sharing your thoughts with us. I know it's a subject a lot of people are passionate about, and we really appreciate hearing everything from you. I know there was some technical difficulties in the beginning where people weren't able to see our ASL interpreters. When we post the recording of this, we will make sure that our ASL interpreters are visible in the recording for the entire thing, not just the second half of it. And I also want to mention, I see we've still got some hands up, and I know that there were some folks that we weren't able to get to today. So we can go ahead and send an email out to all of today's registrants and host an additional hour for your feedback. Next, let's see, on the 12th, that's Monday, from 11 to 12 o'clock. So we'll go ahead and send emails out to everybody on this list. And if there are people who would like to continue making comments, we'll go ahead and host an additional hour for that. So look out for that email. I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. And it looks like we are at time. So thank you, everybody, for coming. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to talking to you again. We're going to be hosting another session next Wednesday. I should know off the top of my head which one that's going to be, but I don't. It looks like it's going to be persons who are immigrants. So if you want to attend that and are not yet registered, you can go ahead and go back to the eBlast where you registered for this one, and there'll be a link for that as well. But we'll go ahead and close it out today. So thank you, and I hope you all have a good day.